in Washington as Donald Trump is about to head to D.C. What the White House is saying about his sit-down with President Biden and why there's a closed-door meeting among Republicans. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
I told President Trump many times, and we've all discussed, we believe we could be the most consequential Congress of the modern era, and he the most consequential president, because we quite literally have to fix almost every metric of public policy. Everything is a mess. Everything.
Mike Johnson, not the only Republican anticipating tomorrow, but here's a big question for the current House Speaker. Will Donald Trump endorse him as the next Speaker of the House when he descends on D.C.? Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. A live look across the Intercoastal in Palm Beach, Florida, as President-elect Trump continues to select the key decision makers to start off his second term. The former governor of Arkansas, former presidential candidate as well, Mike Huckabee, announced as the U.S. ambassador to Israel, a key post for a key ally attacked 13 months ago, who's also stared down Iranian missiles. And within the recent minutes here, the president-elect announcing John Radcliffe will be the next head of the CIA. He was the director of national intelligence at the end of the first Trump administration. Bill McGinley named White House counsel, making him the top lawyer for the incoming president at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. By the way, our partners at thehill.com also among those reporting that the South Dakota governor, Kristi Noem, will be the next head of the Department of Homeland Security. However, Trump has yet to officially reveal the pick. It was on this show earlier this year when Noem was at the southern border, and our Mick Mulvaney, Trump's former White House chief of staff, said this at the time.
I'm sitting here watching this. We've talked about how she's taken a big hit in her, off that vice presidential sort of pedestal in the last couple of days. But I'm sitting here watching. I was making a note with Aaron that's got the look of a future DHS secretary under the next Trump administration.
Mm-hmm. All right, we begin tonight here on The Hill with Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor. Hello, sir. You hit the nail on the head there. Let's expand upon that. Why do you think you saw it at the time, why do you think Donald Trump made the pick?
Listen, it's nice to get it right once out every 9 or 10 times, right? I do like the pick. They get along well. She knows the issues. She's going to be great on television for him, which is what he's going to need. There's going to be just an onslaught of attacks in a lot of the press against the Trump administration or what they want to do at the border, and she's going to be the face of that.
What about the onslaught with her and the book tour and you remember with the dog and all of that? Yeah. Because there were some real concerns. She was basically running for VP at the time.
She was, and I think at the time, elsewhere in that same sort of interview we did several months ago, like, look, we think she's probably off the list for VP because of what you mentioned.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you're out entirely. And again, I think she'd be pretty good at this.
All right. Michael Waltz, the National Security Advisor, Congressman currently, John Radcliffe, former Congressman, former Director of National Intelligence at the CIA. What does that tell you about part of the national security apparatus that we're starting to see being built out?
A couple of things. I don't know Waltz hardly at all. I worked with a little bit when I was at the White House, but I didn't serve with him. I served with John Radcliffe, both in the White House when I was a chief and then on the Hill together when we were in Congress. This is going to be, they're a little bit more hawkish than Donald Trump would be. It sort of brings some balance. What have we said before? Donald Trump likes to have differing opinions. He likes loyalty, but that's not the same as saying you can't have your own opinion. So I think you're going to see Waltz and, to a lesser extent, Radcliffe saying, look, Mr. President, maybe we should do this, and it might be different than what the president's hearing from other people.
The South China Morning Post today noting Michael Waltz's past stances on China, so it's certainly been seen over there.
Great example, by the way, TikTok. Okay. My guess
we're getting there.
Yeah, Waltz is probably for banning TikTok. Be curious to see how that debate goes inside the Oval Office.
So I see Michael Waltz, I see John Radcliffe, I see Mike Huckabee, Bill McGinley, all these names come out. And it was after this show last night, Mick, when all of a sudden we started getting the reports, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. Donald Trump hasn't officially made that announcement yet. And you and I know, when I covered the White House, it was the tweet speaks for itself, meaning when it comes from Trump, it's official. We haven't seen it come from Trump yet.
And there's been a lot of names since Rubio's name came out last night. There's been a lot of names that have been officially sort of named to positions in the next administration. And those names don't include Rubio. All it does is encourage the discussion in this town as to whether or not Rubio is getting Romneyed. I don't think that's the case. I think that Rubio's got a close enough relationship with Susie Wiles that he's not being mistreated like that. But again, every passing hour that goes on without Rubio makes people wonder what's going on.
I'll leave it here. Anyone on your radar? Names you're hearing?
The one I was interested in really was one that's already been named, which is Mike Huckabee for Israel. That took me a little bit by surprise. I didn't have that on my bingo card. I've just talked to a very prominent member of the Jewish community, one who's involved in the fundraisers with Donald Trump, very close to Miriam Adelson, and they are ecstatic about the pick. Both this and the gentleman they just picked for. Thank you very much. Forgot his name. This is a name I would not have picked out of a hat. But the Jewish American community seems to like it very much, and that's a good sign.
Mick Mulvaney, former White House Chief of Staff, hang by.
Thank you.
We'll chat throughout the hour. Meantime, happening right now up on Capitol Hill, the 3 Senate candidates to replace the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell meeting in a closed-door forum ahead of tomorrow's full vote among Republican senators. That vote will be between John Thune, John Cornyn, and Rick Scott. Now, Trump is also expected to head to Capitol Hill tomorrow, as he hasn't endorsed anyone in either race for the Senate Majority Leader or Speaker of the House. That position, as you know, currently held by Mike Johnson.
President Trump is going to meet with President Biden at the White House. And so it was suggested, in fact, I think he said it first before I did, but that he wanted to come and visit with House Republicans.
NewsNation Washington correspondent Joe Khalil joining us now. Hello, Joe. We're already shaking and moving here in Washington. Meeting happening right now among senators. What's going on?
Yeah, so I think it's telling so far that President Trump, or President-elect Trump, has not yet weighed in and likely won't at this point. Look, there's obviously this pressure campaign. Rick Scott is seen as the sort of MAGA wings choice for this role.
Right.
But if you talk to senators, you talk to staff on the Senate side, John Thune, John Cornyn, they have done a lot of the work, right? They've fundraised. Right. They have helped people campaign. They haven't made many enemies. The fact that this is going to be a private vote, a secret ballot, means all of the pressure coming from Twitter, social media, and from emails and calls to the office, those senators don't necessarily have to be answering to those people with their votes. So that's going to be a big impact.
53 of them in the room. I guess you need 27 to be the next Senate Majority Leader. On the other side, real quick, Joe, Mike Johnson, current Speaker of the House. Do we expect Donald Trump to come out tomorrow and say he's the guy, or could there be some talk among House Republicans?
Well, look, we think that there may be a challenge to Speaker Johnson. I'm not sure what Donald Trump is going to do, if he weighs in one way or another. That challenge, we believe, may be coming from the House Freedom Caucus. But I had a conversation today with the chairman of the caucus, Andy Harris. Most of it private, but what I can say is my impression is they didn't really settle on a person, at least late in the afternoon. They decided there was going to be a challenge without a person that they had identified.
More in theory.
So I think what that does is it's an indication that, yes, Republicans control all 3 levers, House, Senate, and the White House, but, there may still be some challenges to this very thin majority that Republicans have.
All right, Joe Khalil, thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir. Meantime, Republicans would not have been able to secure the House in a trifecta if it wasn't for, at least at the very end, Arizona's 6th district. The congressman there, the incumbent, Juan Ciscomani, defeated his Democratic challenger, Kirsten Engel, with 49.5% of the votes. Our partners, the best in the business at Decision Desk HQ, calling this race last night. And with it, the Republican control of Congress, giving Republicans, at least for the moment, the 218th seat they need for the majority. Joining me now here on the Hill, the aforementioned Congressman Ciscomani from Arizona. Congressman, thanks for being with us. Your race was closely watched last night. DDHQ made the call, and with it, 218 for Republicans. Let me ask you sort of where I left off with Joe, which is, should Donald Trump come out tomorrow and say, you know what, Mike Johnson's the guy?
Well, Mike Johnson is the guy right now. He led this conference into victory. We have the majority again, and that's in big part thanks to the leadership of the House. He worked hard on the campaigning side, visited Arizona a couple of times. It's been great working with him, and he's got my support.
Yeah, so he fundraised for you in August. He was out on the campaign trail in the end of October for you as well in Arizona. So do you feel like, look, this is going to be a very narrow majority, Congressman. With someone like that, when they fundraise for you, when they go to your district down the line at the very end, I don't want to say beholden, but how much do you feel the need to back Mike Johnson on whatever comes down the pike in the House?
Well, I'm grateful for the Speaker's support through my entire campaign. You mentioned a couple times that he visited Arizona. I'm very grateful for that. I have a good relationship with him. But it really comes down to who can lead this conference right now. Who is in the spot? Who has done a good job? So besides what happened in the campaign trail, we're down for work here. We're down to business. So for me, it's a matter of what can he, who can actually deliver and keep our conference unified. We saw the challenges of that the last Congress. We don't want to see that again this Congress. There's always going to be difference of opinions and all that, and that we can manage that, but we cannot have the division that we had last Congress. That can only hurt us, especially now as we have the trifecta, and the American people trusted us with this, and we have to deliver. The responsibility is on us.
Let me ask you about the trifecta, because I just watched a Republican challenger for president. Obviously, Donald Trump was president before, but the Republican challenger win the popular vote. First time since 2004, 20 years that's happened. I just watched the Senate move to at least 52, potentially to 53 seats, a big gap there of 6. But Congressman, I'm not sure that Republicans are going to pick up any seats in the House. Maybe 1, maybe 2. There's only 5 left to be called. With that quote unquote wave, why didn't we see it in the House? What's your belief?
Well, we delivered in Arizona. We did what we had to do here. We had the way
I know, but broadly speaking.
The fewer competitive districts that we have, they're harder to flip at this time. So I feel like we did a good job on this. The goal was to win the majority, which we have at this point. Would we like a broader majority? Of course, but we'll be able to work with whatever majority we have. We have to be able to do that, and that's going to be the challenge. But we're up for it.
Congressman Juan Ciscomani, Republican from Arizona. Thank you for being with us here on the Hill, the 218th seat there for Republicans. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Congressman.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.
You got it. All right. Come on in, Scott Traynor, the man behind the numbers, data science director at Decision Desk HQ. You guys were first with the presidential race to call it, first to call it in the House. Congrats, my man.
Thank you.
So what about that question? So here we are right now, right? 219 to 210. There's only 6 seats left. What about the question that I just asked the congressman? I just saw a Republican president win the popular vote, first time in 20 years. I just saw pickups in the Senate. 1, maybe 2 seats that Republicans are going to get in the House. Why?
Where's the coattails, right? That's the example. Look, strong candidates on both sides. I think we're about to talk to a couple seats, but basically he doesn't have the coattails that you would expect him to have. People like him, but we're not seeing it necessarily translate down to the Senate and the House seats.
Is it gerrymandering?
Let's see what the final count looks like. I'm not sure it's gerrymandering. I think there are strong candidates. The Democrats had some very strong challengers. We see that in the upper Midwest with the Senate seats. It looks like the Republicans are probably only going to pick up 1. But, let's let all the votes be counted.
Okay. I'm trying to get interactive here and take you into Ohio. There we go. Just a little bit of a delay. Take you to Toledo, Northwest Ohio. The state line is Michigan there. This is the Democrat keeping a seat, right?
Yep.
In deep red Ohio.
Yeah, Marcy Kaptur is a foundation for the Democrats in Ohio. She's been winning races there for a while in a district that Donald Trump has won. Look, Donald Trump won the state of Ohio by about 13 points. Right. 12 points. She outran Donald Trump by about 1 point, so 13 points total to beat her challenger there. That's an example of a great candidate outrunning the environment, and Donald Trump didn't have enough of a coattail to really flip that seat, even though he won that state by about 12.
So would you call that candidate quality?
Candidate quality.
Okay.
Both on the Democratic side and not enough coattails on the Republican side.
I'm taking you real quick to NE2. We talked about this Nebraska too. We talked about this time and time again. This is Don Bacon's seat. He held serve there.
Yeah, and this is where the Democrats had trouble. They need to flip seats like this if they were going to see a wave their way. Look, the polling near the end, Tony Vargas looked like he had the edge, had the momentum. Don Bacon's been there before. He was able to eke it out in a district that Harris won pretty handily by about 4 points. Right. So an example, strong candidates have really kind of defied some of the logic here.
Real quick, indulge me. I want to real quick take you to the Senate and what's going on in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Hold on. I'm going to flip over here to PA in the Senate. I got like 30 seconds left with you, Traynor. what's going on. So that's 29,000 votes.
Yeah, and right before we came in here, the margin went down to about 30,000 votes. We think, and this is the hard part, we think there's about 80 to 100,000 votes left to count. We think they're going to break towards Casey. We don't know. That's why we haven't called it yet. We got to see them count all these votes.
Best in the business, Scott Schraner, Data Science Director at DDHQ. Thank you, sir. Congrats.
Thank you.
Called the White House and the House. First to do it. All right, other side of the break. TikTok. Donald Trump. What's he going to do about that? Right? January 19th is when TikTok basically has to sell or get out of the U.S. But will that happen? You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Other side of the break. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is the center of politics, and we're back in 4. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. One of the controversial issues that President-elect Donald Trump is expected to weigh in on is the future of the popular, I believe the most popular social media app in this country, TikTok, or at least one of them. The Washington Post reporting that the president-elect is expected to try to halt a possible potential ban. Now, there are an estimated 170 million users of TikTok in the United States. Under a law passed earlier this year, bipartisan, Congress and the Biden administration gave TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, a deadline of January 19th, one day before Inauguration Day, to find a new owner not based in China or lose access to the American market. Joining me now, NewsNation legal contributor Jesse Weber, Scott Bolden as well, NewsNation contributor as well. Hello to you both. This one is fascinating, Jesse and Scott, because you've got this January 19th date of, Jesse, of a sale needing to happen, or basically you're off the App Store. ByteDance ain't selling. And Congress essentially tried to president-proof this, right? So what happens next if Donald Trump's on the other side of this?
So I see this working in a couple of ways. Donald Trump could ask President Biden to delay for 90 days. I don't think Biden is going to do that because I don't think he wants to give Trump the win, and I don't think ByteDance is going to sell. What I think what will happen is once Trump comes into office, he can sign an executive order to try to repeal the law. Don't think that's going to work because of constitutional reasons. He could ask Congress to try to repeal the law. The problem with that is majority of Republicans supported the ban. Can he get the support to do that? There's another option. He can direct his Attorney General and the Department of Justice to just never enforce the law. Don't prosecute anybody. Don't go after anybody civilly for doing this. And then I actually saw this. It's a little bit of an eerie, different one. He might be able to interpret the law to say that ByteDance actually did divest its interest from it, but that's kind of weird legal reasoning and looking at the statute in an interesting way. So there's a number of different ways this could work out, but it's interesting to say.
A number of ways, Scott, though, if one of them, which Jesse brings up, is, you know what, we're not going to, I can't do anything about it right now. We're just not going to prosecute it. If you're Tim Cook, right, what are you going to say? Like, okay, you can go forward with this? How could you trust that?
It's actually no man's land, and no company wants to be in no man's land. You know, Jesse, one other thing I thought about is that there's litigation pending in this case, and through some motion process, both parties could ask the court to stay enforcement of the January 19th deadline, arguing some legal issue or arguing that without that stay, there may be a deal in place, for example, or that what they've argued about the First Amendment, the constitutionality of it, that deserves a stay because there's a new president, and there may be a deal in the works. And remember, Steve Mnuchin is still out there.
That's true. And I think Scott's 100% right. So there's a court opinion that's scheduled for December. Whoever it's favorable for, they're going to appeal it to the Supreme Court. I'm not sure the Supreme Court's going to take up this issue. It does raise a very interesting First Amendment argument, although I'll tell you, ByteDance kind of made a mistake when they were arguing this. They admitted that it was the Chinese company that directs its content. Foreign companies, foreign countries do not have First Amendment rights. So that's a big issue for them as well.
So let me cut to the chase here. TikTok. Half the country is believed to be on the thing, whether you like it or not. And there's lots of conversations here about social media, our children, so on and so forth. But half the country is on it, give or take. Jesse, next year, let's go after January 20th. Do you see a scenario in which TikTok does not exist in the United States?
I think it's a realistic possibility it doesn't exist for a number of factors based on what I said.
That it does or doesn't?
That it doesn't exist. But look, I will tell you, maybe the Congress will give him, will support Donald Trump in this. I just not necessarily seeing it happen. But I think there's a little bit of a difficulty here given the timeline.
Yeah, but beyond the timeline, though, Jesse, wouldn't you agree that you still have to, we've talked about everything but the national security interests here. If this is a spy platform for the Chinese, and that's what we haven't seen, that's going to be playing in the minds of the legislators, the president, and all the information that we have not seen, notwithstanding how popular this platform is. I think that's really what's going to drive it, at least behind the scenes.
This is one of the first bipartisan efforts. They got together and actually said TikTok should be banned. So I think there's this realistic possibility. We might not see TikTok on the app stores come 2025.
All right, got to leave it there. Scott, Jesse, thank you both. Appreciate it. Still much more ahead. Here on the Hill, the president-elect saying he wants to get rid of the Department of Education. Will that actually happen? And if so, what does it look like? We are live in the state of Oklahoma with its superintendent there, Ryan Walters. He is one of the names being talked about as possibly the next head of the education department. So what would he do with it if Trump says it's got to go? The Hill, back and forth. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Live look right now at the White House, where the outgoing president, Joe Biden, will host the incoming president, Donald Trump, tomorrow morning, 46 and 47 together. Our Kelly Meyer here with us on what we might expect. Fly on the wall type stuff tomorrow, Meyer.
I'm excited for this day. This is going to be interesting.
What are they saying?
We're all gearing up for it. We're going in early. We're ready. 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. The former president, the current president, and then the future president, all in one room in the Oval Office. So we asked the White House today, the White House press briefing, Karine Jean-Pierre comes out, a lot of questions about what's going to be discussed. They say this is about showing the American people that this is a peaceful transfer of power. We know that this did not happen when Trump passed over the White House to President Biden. What's likely to come up, Ukraine. We also were hearing whether or not...
the White House is saying that President Biden's going to talk to Donald Trump about Ukraine. The reality is Donald Trump's going to do whatever he wants. He just won the popular vote, no matter what President Biden says in that Oval Office tomorrow.
Exactly. And, we saw President Biden was there with the Israeli President Herzog today. And he'd only do so much up until January 20th, and then it becomes Trump's game. Yeah. So he can say as much as he wants, but as you said, he picks up the ball on January 20th. So we also were talking about whether or not VP Harris will be there, Trump's last opponent. Okay. And then this is what Karine Jean-Pierre had to say today. Take a listen.
This is a meeting with the president and the president-elect. This is the norm, that the incoming president and the current president sit down in the Oval Office and have a discussion, and that's what you're going to see tomorrow.
So no VP Harris. We don't know if Trump will go over and see her at the Naval Observatory like Bush and Gore did back in 2000, but we're not expecting that. So.
Naval Observatory is where the VP lives, sort of down the road here in Washington. My gosh, what a scene. And then Trump heads up to the Capitol tomorrow as well to talk to Republicans. Donald Trump descends on D.C.
The show is back, yeah.
Kelly Meyer here for us. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. Meantime, President-elect Trump is vowing big changes to how the federal government could oversee America's educational system. The president-elect released a video during his campaign detailing his plans to, as he puts it, revitalize America's schools, including eliminating the Department of Education.
One other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states. We want them to run the education of our children because they'll do a much better job of it. You can't do worse.
Ryan Walters put himself at the forefront of the education debate when he mandated Oklahoma's schools grades 5 through 12 incorporate the Bible into lesson plans. His name is now surfacing as one of the possible candidates to be the next Secretary of Education. And Ryan, once again, joins us here on the Hill. Thanks for being back with us tonight, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So you've seen it. I've seen it. Your name's floating out there as potentially the head of the education department. Let me ask you, Ryan, eliminating the education department, if that happens, what do you think that looks like and how does that happen?
Well, first of all, it would be unbelievable. I mean, President Trump has laid out the best plan for education of any presidential candidates, the boldest, most aggressive, most conservative. This is the reform we need. You do away with the Federal Department of Education. What you no longer have is this overreach and this left-wing drive to push states toward an agenda. Just over the summer, remember when Joe Biden threatened our states by saying, if you don't allow boys and girls sports, boys and girls bathrooms, I'm going to take your money and I'm going to bring litigation against you. These were the type of things we were dealing with the Federal Department of Education all the time. President Trump does away with that. We get indoctrination out. And then secondly, that power back to states is key. This was never meant to be a power in D.C. It was meant for states to solve their own problems, and states should be returning that power to parents. Every child's unique. The solutions are unique. We got to get it back to the states.
Yeah, I hear you on the philosophy there and the thinking and why you believe this. I wonder, Ryan, how it happens, though, because I'm looking at $160 billion in student aid, for example, just last year alone. It's not like that money's just all of a sudden going to show up in people's bank accounts overnight. There would have to be some sort of an unwinding process, and then you would have to administer the aid somewhere in some federal government. And that's what I'm getting at with, how does this work? How does this happen?
Well, let me give you a few options the Trump administration could choose from. I know one, for example, is block grants. We do this with several other programs. Let me give you an example. Special ed funding that comes from the feds. If they were to block grant it to states should do what we would do with it, which is, hey, we're going to give it to parents. We're going to use ESAs. These are education savings account. We see them across the country. Let parents direct the funding for the needs of their individual children. So many of the programs, if you put them inside the parents' hands, they are going to dictate the betterment of the use of those funds better than anybody in D.C. ever could. So we've got to get the power back to the parents. We've got to get choice and those options to parents. That's the way to do it. And again, you're going to see students flourish with that type of model.
Ryan, we just watched an election in which America clearly said the price is too high, that inflation was out of control or got out of control, and the cost of so many things is through the roof. And that includes college. Okay, I don't mean to pick on University of Oklahoma, right? But you're in Oklahoma, so let me just use that as an example. At OU, I went to their website, okay? For tuition fees, books, housing, and food, OU says it's $30,000 a year for an in-state student, $48,000 for non-residents. Again, not picking on them, but we're talking about Oklahoma here. Student debt, $1.7 trillion in student debt. There's 43 million Americans who are currently borrowers, average balance of about $38,000. What do you do about bringing the cost of college down? And can you do it? Yes, there's obviously extreme merit for talking about the Department of Education and K through 12. I've got kids. They're in public schools. But man, you talk to teenagers and the parents of teenagers, and they look at the price of college and they see that and they say it's out of control.
Oh yeah, and you're 100% right on that. It's out of control. So again, what we should be doing, putting power in the hands of the individuals. We should be giving students these education savings accounts when they pass through high school to say, listen, here's how much you get. You can take it to a career tech, a vocational institute. You can take it to college. But guess what? This is the way we're going to fund this. Colleges, you bring your prices down. You go make your case to the consumer. But listen, we hear parents all over the country saying, hey, I'd rather have my kid get a skill that's employable today rather than take their chances going 6 figures in debt at a college that may not have a degree that ends in a job.
Taking up the loans?
Say that again.
Do you want the states taking up the loans?
No, absolutely. We are going to continue to empower individuals to make those decisions. Do not pay the institutions. Do not pay the bureaucrats. You give money directly to the individuals to fund their own education.
Ryan, let me leave you with this. The issue that put you to the national conversation was Bibles in schools. That was an Oklahoma decision that you made. You've been on this show frequently to talk about it. If you end up at the Department of Education, would you try to mandate that nationwide, or do you believe that's a state's issue?
Look, I believe that if you're teaching American history, the Bible absolutely has to be included, and we cannot allow left-wing activists to sit here and say, well, we don't like Christianity, so we don't. You have to have it in the classrooms. We will ensure that history is taught in every class. That means kids will know American exceptionalism. That means kids will know the role that faith played. We will be unapologetic about that here in Oklahoma. We want to make sure that every student knows the role that the Bible played in American history.
Has the Trump team talked to you about the education spot?
Look, my focus has been in Oklahoma and the education here, and we're going to be on the front lines of bringing forth that America First agenda from President Trump to our state.
Brian Walters, we'll leave it there. He's the top educator in the state of Oklahoma, once again with us here on the Hill. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, joining me now, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation political contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. NewsNation political contributor Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist as well. Kurt?
Hey.
Hi. What were you? I saw you shaking your head to what?
I don't understand how you can be the party that says we don't want government all up in your business and then have a platform where we're going to mandate in our schools that you should study the Bible in public schools. The same party also that was against mandates like COVID coming into your schools. Those type of decisions, conversations should be left to families and parents, not in our classrooms.
I think there's a distinction there for Republicans between the federal government and the state government. I think we're fine with state government doing it. I think we like state government. We like local government. We like stuff that's accountable to the people. We just don't want folks in Washington, D.C. making decisions for Abilene, Texas. So I think it's completely consistent with a conservative worldview to sort of say, look, get the feds out of educating our kids and let the state and local governments do it.
This has been talked about for quite some time. This ain't new, right? And Donald Trump was president once before. It didn't happen then. Do you think he'll do it now, and why?
You know, look, here's what I think, is that they're better at it now. I've had some conversations last 24 hours.
What do you mean by that?
They're going to be better at governing and better at putting the agenda into play. I had a conversation last night with somebody in the Trump transition team, and she was talking about how to get something that I didn't even think was reconcilable, which I know I just put everybody to sleep, but on a reconciliation bill in the Senate, in a reconciliation bill, an immigration policy which would never be subject to reconciliation. Why is that important? Because it gets past the filibuster, and they're figuring out ways to do it already. They're taking a very sophisticated approach to putting their agenda to place. So yeah, I think there's a chance to be a lot more aggressive in his policies in the second.
Let me ask you this: you have kids. Trump's talking about school choice. Parents, as a parent, don't you want more choices for your children? Any objections there?
We always want more choices for our children. But again, at some point, if we're going to have the states make every decision, we're going to defer everything to the states, why do we have a federal government in the first place? Why bother even having the United States of America if we're just going to let the states do everything?
You know, it's funny you ask that, because we have a document that tells us what to do, which is the Constitution. That was the concept. There's a limited list of things that the federal government is supposed to do. Deal with national defense, deal with things like...
We also talk about separation of church and state, but Republicans have no problem just completely ignoring that all the time when they talk about things like, let's have the government decide what curriculum is taught in classrooms.
I think that means he's agreeing with me on the Constitution. I'll take that.
Let me leave it with this. The night of the debate at 10:15, I walked into my colleague's office here, and I said, I just want to note something. We're in 75 minutes into this debate, nothing about education. And there was a topic that got passed over in this election, and if you talk to parents who have children, I think they're just as curious about what's going on in their school boards than as much as anything that comes out of this building behind me.
And here's why it doesn't get the attention of the folks in that building. And this may be part of the reason Republicans want to get it away from that building, which is it's just not big enough. The amount of money we spend on education, I think we'll spend more on the hurricane recovery bill for Helene than we will on the Department of Education. It's just not that much money to those folks.
I think education was a huge missed opportunity for Democrats in this election. If they spent the amount of time that they spent talking and demonizing Donald Trump and Republicans and more about education, nothing relates more to the day-to-day lives of parents than education.
All right, got to move on. Gavin Newsom, what's he doing? Is set to meet with President Biden here in Washington. Plus, Jon Stewart. Did you hear his theory on why the Democrats got, as he put it, shellacked? Full panel, other side of the break.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
You're right, Cuomo, and that hurts me to say.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
I took notes, Cuomo, for you.
Tonight at 8/7 Central, only on NewsNation.
They didn't do the woke thing. They tried. They acted like Republicans for the last 4 months. They wore camo hats and went to Cheney family reunions. Do you know how dangerous it is to wear a hunting hat around Cheney's? You have any idea?
All right, welcome back. That, of course, Jon Stewart last night criticizing the Harris campaign's attempt to woo Republicans, and he didn't stop there.
Democrats were mostly running against an identity that was defined for them based on a couple of months of post-George Floyd defund the police Me Too Instagram posts from 4 years ago. What happened was the country felt like government wasn't working for them. And the Democrats in particular were taking their hard-earned money and giving it to people who didn't deserve it as much as them. And so the Democrats got shellacked.
All right, welcome back. Full panel with me now. Mick Scott, you know them, seen them already. Samantha Dravis, former Trump administration official. Kurt, hello once again. Let me start over here. Is that why Democrats got, as Jon Stewart put it, shellacked?
Well, it wasn't just 2 months of identity politics. It wasn't just 2 months of that narrative. It was 4 years of wokeness, 4 years of woke policies. Remember the interview where Kamala said we need to be woke and we need to stay woke? We had executive orders on trans males, biological males participating in women's sports. We had a Pentagon that had orders saying women need to have gender-neutral combat standards. So it was 4 years of wokeness, and I think that was repudiated by the American people. The Democrats started running away from that because the polling clearly showed that wasn't popular.
I think that, first of all, there's no one simple answer why Democrats got shellacked in this election. I think it's a lot more complex than that. Number two, I think Democrats spend an inordinate amount of time talking about things, and this goes back to what we were just talking about things that most Americans don't care about, frankly, versus the things that affect their day-to-day lives, like education, like Mick and I were just saying. I think number three, there's something that Stewart is onto when he says Democrats spend a lot of time palling around with Republicans, trying to get Republican votes, trying to appeal to that audience. You know, I spent the other day speaking to a bunch of students at American University, about 60 students, and I asked them, why do you think Kamala Harris lost? And the one thing that was surprising me that came up wasn't the Middle East, wasn't abortion, wasn't any of those things. They said when she came out with the I have my own gun shtick, they thought it was a shtick. They didn't think it was authentic. They didn't buy into that.
Stewart hit on that last night.
Well, okay. So this will add to those reasons.
Already laughing at you.
Is it really? No. But
let's
let's be real clear, okay? So the economy, and not just statistics, but making people feel like you got a plan, but you also are going to do something about it and you really feel their pain. And let's not forget, you all, because you're going to start laughing, but it's very real. There's a large swath of America that is still sexist, still racist, and didn't believe that Kamala Harris should be president or could be president, including Latino men who came out and voted for Donald Trump higher than he did 4 years ago.
Scott, historic numbers of women under 30 voting for Donald Trump. So I guess those women are sexist against women.
They voted against their interests. They voted against their interests.
How can you say they voted against?
Personality and character simply did not matter to those 80-plus or 84 million.
But isn't that part of the problem? Isn't that part of the introspection for Democrats when you say somebody else voted against their interests when you're telling somebody else how they should vote and how they should feel and how they should think?
Well, you can vote against your interests. You just put your interests below what's really bugging you about it. So if I don't care about your personality, I don't care about your convictions, but I do care about putting food on the table and gas prices. And I think the disruptor is going to do that. And this was a disruptor election. Then Donald Trump gets the vote and gets the win. And I'm not fighting that he got the win, but he got the win because of a disruptor, and people voted against their political and economic interests.
Here's what I like about that clip. It's funny. It is. We all laughed at it. It is. And listen, we just watched Jimmy Kimmel and all the rest of the late night people get on and start crying. Yeah. At least Jon Stewart's making an effort to still be funny. Yeah. Maybe we can go back now to the time when comedy will transcend politics.
I thought it was funfunny.
Yeah. I
didn't sound like it, but I did think it was funny.
You laughed. You laughed. You did Jamie thing.
That was fun.
It's a good line.
Trump and his rival, one of them, or at least a rival, I guess, Gavin Newsom, the California governor, heading to D.C. to meet with the Biden administration, fresh off his proclamation to quote-unquote Trump-proof California. The Golden State governor will meet with officials to discuss environmental issues. Kurt? This is what you need? A progressive from California coming to Washington and...
Well, listen, let me just say...
Have I seen that before?
I completely agree with Mick Mulvaney that governors and states should do whatever they want to do because it's all about the states, damn it. Come on.
He's the governor. What do you expect him to do besides? What is it, 2024? 2028, his campaign starts now.
One of the things I think that's going to be very interesting is you are going to see the Democrats sort of shift their policy fight to the states, because that's what always happens. You're going to see state attorney generals litigate against the regulations that this Trump administration promulgates or undoes.
What Republicans did when we lost the election.
Exactly, and you will see that. But one thing I think is going to be interesting is now Chevron deference has been overturned.
Oh, so now you're really going deep on us here with Chevron deference.
That means the Trump administration, their rules are not going to get deference from the courts the way that they would have before. So it's going to be, I think you'll see a lot of the states pushing back on the Trump agenda.
I think the one thing that Democrats really need to remember going forward, it is more important to be relatable than right. And they lose track of that sometimes.
All right. Meantime, Trump is tackling, you could say, another issue in the days following his victory. The new kickoff rules in the National Football League. The president-elect posting on Truth Social that, quote, the NFL should get rid of the ridiculous new kickoff rule. Trump has been a constant critic of what the NFL calls the dynamic kickoff.
Or concussions.
Whatever you think about Trump, he's right there. The kickoff rules are...
I disagree.
Oh, really?
I like this new rule. They haven't figured out how to game it yet. They haven't figured out, for those of you who are watching and don't watch football, they changed rules in the kickoff, and if it lands in a certain area, now they have to take it back. They just haven't figured out yet how to integrate it into the system.
Tell me why Trump cares, and like why he's going on Truth in the middle of a transition to post that.
His infatuation with the National Football League goes back 40 years.
Back. He's a fan, too.
He's absolutely.
He's a fan. But here,
talk about relatable versus right.
He wants this to be the XFL, which didn't work, but that's really what he wants.
The NFL has got to have some balance. I mean, the concussion and the former players or the retired players, I mean, the empirical data is just there that this hitting and how we play this game, whether you start at 5 or whether you start at 15, is a real problem later on in life, and they paid out a lot of money because of that.
You want to tell people how to feel there, too, or no?
No. I want the NFL to continue to balance and to make the game safe.
Let's abolish no fair catch rule.
The only time I'll ever defer to Scott is on football, Scott. I'll let you have it.
It's a low bar.
It was interesting to see the president-elect put that out. All right, thank you.
It's not the last you've heard of that.
Oh, no. There's going to be more of that. You know it, I know it. Still ahead. On the other side of the break, the president-elect taps the former Arkansas governor, Mike Huckabee, to a really big post. Leland Vitter, host of On Balance, on the other side of the break.
Now time to talk about completely eradicating Hamas, giving Israel a right of security and safety. Stop the nonsense about two-state solution. Never going to happen, never should happen. And let's look towards some real solutions.
Welcome back here to the Hill. That, of course, the former Arkansas governor, Mike Huckabee, here on NewsNation Morning in America just the other day, as he was just nominated by President-elect Trump to serve as the next U.S. ambassador to Israel. Host of On Balance, Leland Vitter, joins me now. Leland, hello. This is someone that I know that you know well. It was fascinating. I had Sean Spicer here on the show yesterday asking about the cadence of how President-elect Trump is going to be going about this. He said, look, an ambassador could come next for all you know. And there it was, one of the first picks for Trump. Leland, I'm told we have a little bit of an audio issue, so I'm going to pull out here for a second. But it only leaves us with about 12 seconds left here on the show.